To install an OF1010 router into your CMS table, we first need to invert the table insert so we can work from the underside. Next, you want to check to see if your height adjustment tab is in the vertical position, and if so, move it to the horizontal position for the 1010. And then next, the alignment ring for the OF1010, you want the smooth side facing down toward the work area, and you want the open side with the part number stamped on it up toward the router. Now this alignment ring also has a tab on it, so as you put this into the table, rotate it until the tab drops into the recess in the table for its alignment. Next, take the OF1010 router, collapse it, lock it in place. First thing we have to do is remove the retaining ring from the bottom of the router. Currently it's holding the dust shroud on the router. You can leave the dust shroud in place and you will have better dust collection if you leave it there. And if you have the outrigger foot installed, you need to remove that. And we're going to replace that with an alignment bracket. Now, the alignment bracket has two tabs, a small tab and a large tab. For the 1010, we want to use the small tab pointing up. And this 4mm tab will fit into the 4mm hole on the CMS table insert. Now as you turn your router upside down to put it into the table, it helps to put your finger against the dust shroud to keep it from falling out while you insert the router into the table, with your alignment pin going into the smaller of the two holes and centered on the alignment ring. If you need to, you can use your handle, crank handle, on the underside of the lead screw to lower your height adjustment. Release the router into the height adjustment, leave the lever unlocked. And then the next thing is to secure the router using the three dogs. There is a flat surface and a curved surface. The flat surface is higher, and that's the one that rests against the router base. As you're tightening these, make sure that it's on the flat of the router and firmly tighten down so that the router cannot slip. Do the same with all three dogs. With all three screws firmly tightened, make sure the router can't move. It's firmly locked into place. And we can flip the insert back over. Engaging the hinge on the rear end, dropping the front down, and then you can lock the insert into the table with the two screws on the front. To install the extension table, start with the brackets and first unscrew the adjustment screw all the way out so there's no thread extending, and then unscrew the square nut almost all the way off the cap screw, and then we're going to install this into the slot in the leg of the table. Make sure that the nut fits inside the slot. Tighten that down. You can snug this a little bit. You don't want to make it super tight yet. Just enough that it's not going to wiggle on you, but it can still move. We'll tighten those up later. To install your extension table onto the main table, start with the lower posts and their keyhole slots, and then the upper screws into their slots. And the first time you install this, it's going to be out of adjustment, so make sure you're pushing down while you're tightening the nuts to make sure that they're resting in the bottom of the slots. And that will be taken care of when we calibrate this to our main table in the next step. With the extension table loosely installed onto the main table, we want to set the extension table to be flush with the main table. And to start with, you want to make sure that you have a gap between your straight edge and the extension table, and make sure that the extension table is sloped downward away from the straight edge. And that's because it's easier to raise this adjustment up into your straight edge than it is to try and lower it down. Begin raising the upper adjustment, but not enough for it to touch. And when it's close, now we can go back in and tighten up the brackets that we left loose earlier. Just make sure that they're not touching as you tighten that up. And then begin tightening up the extensions. One thing about these extension adjustments is that the inside nut is not a standard nut. It's a flange nut. So if you back that off too far, it will fall out of the bracket and you can have a bad adjustment later. So make sure that the flange stays inside the bracket as you make your adjustments. Bring the outside so it's parallel with your straight edge. And then finish adjusting the front. Make sure that you don't raise your straight edge off the main table. If you do, push the bracket back in. Do the same at the rear. Once you have it adjusted correctly, tighten up the locking nuts. Double check. Your extension is ready to use. To install the sliding table attachment to your CMS table, you first need to install the nut plate into the edge. Put the nut in through the opening at the far end, slide it over, and lock it into place. Do the same with the other nut plate. Then to install the rail, put it over the edge of the table. Line it up to be nearly flush with the front end. Tighten the thumb screw into the nut plate. Do the same with the rear thumb screw. To install the carriage, we need to first remove one of the bumpers and slide the other bumper down to the end of the rail. And then slide the carriage over the end of the rail and reinstall the bumper. This first bumper you can leave right at the edge of the table, and that just stops the carriage from moving off the end. The second bumper you can adjust to wherever you need it for your starting position when you're going to be routing. To install the fence, first place the fence body over the carriage and tighten down the thumb screw on the back. Turn it to 0. And you can install the fence rail. The fence rail can go on in one of two directions. You can put it on the low profile like this, or you can put it on tall in this direction. This lever locks down the fence from sliding. When you need to change the fence angle, loosen the locking nut, lift up on the pin, rotate it to the angle that you want. If it's a stop position, release the pin and it'll be locked into place, and then retighten the clamping knob. You can adjust your fence height so that there's less of a gap between your fence rail and your tabletop using the adjustment screw on the top of the rail. Loosen up the mounting screw for the rail and then begin unscrewing the adjustment screw to lower the sliding table until it begins to drag on the table. When it drags on the table, start retightening while pushing down on the table until the dragging stops. Then you can retighten the mounting screw. Do the same for the rear. For improved dust collection on your CMS table, you may want to get the vac hose splitter kit. Now what this does is allows you to connect a single vacuum and split it off into a large hose for your fence and a small hose that goes under the table to your router. Now the kit includes the large hose, the small hose, the large hose fitting, and the small hose fitting, as well as the Y adapter. Now you might notice there's also another clip in the kit that clips onto the front edge of a CMS or MFT table for holding your hose for other applications, but it's not needed for the CMS setup. Now to begin, you have to assemble your hoses. Start with the retaining ring, slide it over the hose, put on the threaded adapter and turn it counterclockwise, the reverse of a normal screw. Slide the fitting over the end and then push the retaining ring inside the fitting until it snaps. Do the same with a small hose. Threaded adapter, counterclockwise. Put the end on, snap it together. Then attach your hose to the Y fitting. Also turn it on counterclockwise. A large fitting. Insert the large hose into the back of the fence, and the small hose connects to your router's dust shroud under the table. And then plug the Y fitting into your vac.